Hi. It seems like I'm talking and recording again, so welcome back to Idiot Mystic, the show where I try to open the forbidden tab in your brain. Tonight's question is probably almost too on the nose for this podcast. Is UFC Freedom 250 an occult blood sacrifice ritual? Because let's be honest, if I wanted to trigger the pattern detection centers of the internet, what would I build? Probably a giant octagon under a structure called the Claw on the White House lawn, a blood sport on Flag Day and a president's birthday, fighters walking out of the Oval Office, press and ceremonial events staged at the Lincoln Memorial and the Ellipse, a military-heavy audience, a national anthem at a UFC event where the national anthem isn't normally played, like a championship boxing fight. And all of it wrapped in Freedom 250 branding from a White House initiative that literally talks about prayer and rededicating America as one nation under God. I think both of us can see that that's not subtle. But then again, subtle isn't the same thing as sinister, and sinister definitely isn't the same thing as proven. So tonight I'll try to do this the only honest way I know how. I'll try to separate documented fact, symbolic interpretation, and my own full-send speculation. Here's what we know for sure. UFC Freedom 250 is scheduled for Sunday, June 14th, 2026 on the White House South Lawn in Washington, D.C., with the card beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern. We already know who's fighting: Topuria versus Gage, Piera versus Gon. At first I thought the names didn't matter and people who don't watch MMA wouldn't care. But then I started looking at things from an intuitive, energetic perspective, which I know a lot of you don't believe in. I guess I'm talking about vibes. Topuria just went through a divorce and a crazy emotional roller coaster where there were rumors he might never be able to fight again. Gagey just brutalized someone who was almost sent to him like a lamb to the slaughter in Paddy Pimblett. If you're not an MMA fan, you probably don't know, but it was a one-sided, bloody affair. Gagey is going up against someone who is expected to knock him out, but he's sacrificing himself for America, at least symbolically. He's willing to go out on his shield. Like, he's not the kind of person who won't fight. At the same time, he's currently feuding with Sean Strickland, another UFC champion whose political views have had him banned from the White House event. So he's going to bat for the establishment or the higher order. Then we have Alex Pereira, who always participates in his indigenous spiritual traditions of summoning the strength of his ancestors and spirits. Previously, people who have fought him have said there's an energy around him and you can feel it. And then you have Cyril Gane, who is just basically never on the right side of history at all in his MMA career. He's just... his last fight ended in him almost poking the other guy's eyes out. And of course, if you don't share my occult, esoteric, pseudo-spiritual, crazy person outlook on the world, I completely understand. But I still appreciate you being here. I think the weekend arc matters too. Public reporting puts a Friday night press conference at the Lincoln Memorial, Saturday fan fest and ceremonial programming on the Ellipse, and the fight itself on Sunday at the White House. So before I get cosmic and super weird, let's get this straight. The basic architecture of this upcoming rant is not a rumor. This is real, publicly scheduled, and internationally covered. And I know this is boring, but the official federal paper trail makes this even more surreal. The National Park Service issued a closure order specifically for UFC Freedom 250, covering parts of the Ellipse, sidewalks, Lafayette Park approaches, and surrounding areas from May 20th through June 28th for setup and teardown. The document says the Secret Service needed secure staging areas, standoff distance, guest screening, and separation between ticketed guests and the general public. It lists banned items ranging from drones and tripods to knives, fireworks, and large bags. In other words, whatever this thing is, it's definitely not underground. It's government noticed, perimeter controlled, and honestly intensely securitized. I just learned that was a word, by the way. Audience-wise, it's reported that more than 4,000 spectators would watch from the arena, and that 85,000 free tickets were planned for the Ellipse viewing zone. In Time magazine, Dana White said that at least 1,200 of roughly 4,300 South Lawn seats would go to active duty military personnel, and he described a guest mix involving White House allocations, UFC TKO allocations, and invited celebrities. To me, this doesn't look like a regular UFC card. It's a part stadium, part state ceremony, and honestly at this point, some kind of weird elite gladiatorial pageant. Now that we've gotten through the boring logistics, let's get into interpretation. For me, why does this event trigger the word ritual so hard for me? Because ritual, in the scholarly sense, is formalized performance loaded with symbols, hierarchy, access control, and meaning. The White House, the Lincoln Memorial, and the Ellipse are not just random places. The White House is a civic shrine. The Lincoln Memorial is a monument of national myth. And the Ellipse is the people's viewing field, arranged around a power center. When you add blood sport, anthem, military audience, monumental architecture, and a named structure called the Claw, I think you'll find they've built something that feels a lot less like fight card and more like ceremony of power. Obviously, I know this doesn't prove occult content, but to me it absolutely proves ritualized form. And the White House's own Freedom 250 language pushes the sacred register even harder by inviting Americans to pray and rededicate the nation. That I don't think there's any hidden spirituality there. It's overtly public and fused to national branding. It doesn't matter if you call it civil religion, patriotic liturgy, or like empire core. Whatever you call it, it feels like a ritual. I think this is where the Roman comparison earns its keep. Historians note that gladiatorial combat in Rome had its roots in funerary rites and later evolved into a mass political spectacle. Public games under the Roman state carried messages about hierarchy, divine favor, and the power of rulers to provide blood, pageantry, and communal, organized emotion. So when people say this White House card feels Roman, they're not really being melodramatic. They're just picking up on something that's historically backed. Violence staged in a semi-sacred civic space, witnessed by ranked audiences, wrapped in national or imperial meaning. It's the same thing. I think there is something to say because I like being fair. The Roman analogy does not automatically get you to occult blood sacrifice. It gets you first to state spectacle, managed violence, and the theater of authority. If you want the smartest version of the conspiracy angle, that's it. Not they're secretly worshipping Moloch on the lawn, which they'd probably do on other nights, but more like they're turning the presidency into an arena set and using the combat as a ritualized display of their sovereignty or power. I'd say if you wanted to talk to someone else that wasn't me about it, that claim is probably more plausible and a little more unnerving because it's actually happening in public. So when people bring up Epstein, MKUltra, elite ritual abuse, all that stuff, I don't think the point should be, here's a clean direct line from this scandal to this UFC event. I think that would be too easy for people to attack, and honestly, it's not even the strongest argument. The stronger argument is that we already know powerful institutions have done things in secret that sound insane until the documents come out. I think that's the part people always want you to forget. Epstein was not a Reddit fairy tale. He was a real person, and it was a real elite trafficking network with money, access, politicians, intelligence-adjacent weirdness, royalty, celebrities, and blackmail-shaped shadows everywhere. MKUltra was not a paranoid fantasy either. It was a real CIA program involving drugs, psychological manipulation, mind control research, and human beings treated like experimental material. So I'm not trying to say every weird event is automatically connected to those things. The point I'm trying to make is that the official world has already admitted over and over that the powerful are capable of hiding monstrous things behind respectable language. So if you're watching a sanctioned blood sport being placed inside the symbolic center of American state power, at a moment when the world is already soaked in actual war, it's not crazy to say, this feels like more than entertainment. Because again, like I've said before, a ritual doesn't always mean what you think it means, and it doesn't always announce itself with robes and candles. Sometimes rituals can be choreography, or repetition, or a space being chosen very carefully. Sometimes a ritual is bodies being offered up in front of the tribe, so the tribe can feel unified, excited, distracted, or whatever emotion the machine needs that day. That's where UFC Freedom 250 starts looking really strange to me. Not because Dana White has to come out in a hood and chant Latin into a microphone. I mean, I would like that, but it sounds a little cartoony. I'm talking about something older and much more obvious. Blood, spectacle, empire, elite guests, national myth, and an audience that becomes emotionally synchronized around controlled violence. And if you believe, as many occult systems do, that attention is energy, emotion is energy, that attention, emotion, blood, and fear are energy, and that mass spectacle can concentrate that energy, then we both know a fight card at the White House couldn't just be content. This thing is a generator. It's gonna take the aggression, the tribal identity, the national pride, the humiliation, the pain, the dominance, the submission, and the possibility of injury, and package all of that as a sacred civic event that people watch with their families. Now let's add the war context. While real people are being killed in the Middle East, while families are being destroyed, while bodies are actually being torn apart by real bombs, we're staging simulated combat at the symbolic heart of the empire. I don't know about you, but that feels spiritually disgusting to me. It feels sadistic. It's like the empire saying, we're surrounded by real blood, but let's make some ceremonial blood too. Let's turn some violence into pageantry, and pain into a holiday special. Let's have men damage each other for entertainment, while the world burns in the background. And from an occult perspective, that's definitely not neutral. That's the kind of emotional stuff that people have always associated with lower forces, parasitic forces, negative non-human intelligences, whatever language you want to use. I might not be able to prove some entity is sitting there with a fork and a knife, but I'm saying the pattern fits a very old idea. A very old idea that sounds like something out of Star Wars. Suffering creates charge. Fear creates charge. Blood creates charge. And mass attention feeds something. So let's stop pretending the only question is whether there's a secret document somewhere titled Occult Blood Sacrifice Plan. That's definitely not how this works. Or how ritual works. Ritual works through placement, timing, repetition, witnesses, emotional charge, and of course, sacrifice. And ancient Rome understood this perfectly. The gladiatorial games were political ideology as much as they just looked like sports. They were there to remind the public who had power over life and death. They were there to turn violence into entertainment, entertainment into loyalty, and loyalty into empire. The arena became this kind of machine for producing feeling, whether it was fear, awe, or disgust. It made the crowd take part in the logic of domination. Now, if we look at the UFC event through that lens, the octagon is already a ritual space. It is literally a bounded geometric enclosure where two fighters enter. Blood might be spilled. One body is elevated and one body is defeated, and the crowd releases emotion in waves. There are walkouts, music, costumes, fight names, announcement, judges, sponsors, and the final hand raised like a symbolic resurrection of the victor. I know this is a crazy person's take on it, but that sounds like ritualized combat to me. Now move that ritualized combat onto the White House grounds or into the White House symbolic field, and the meaning changes. It stops being merely a fight promotion. It's some kind of fusion of combat sport and state power. It's like blood spilling sanction. It becomes blood sport for entertainment under the flag. And as scary as it is to say, it becomes empire turning the fighter's body into a ceremonial object. Of course, it doesn't help that there are no female fighters on the card. Not that sacrificing them would be better, but at least everyone should get opportunity in this ritual. But this seems to be patriarchally aligned with masculine, dominant, toxic energy. And the Freedom 250 stuff makes this even heavier. Freedom, nation, birthday, founding myth, military witnesses, and a sacred civic space. These are symbols of American civil religion. Like I've said before, the White House is a temple of executive power, and the flag isn't just a flag, and the anthem isn't just a song. These things are treated as sacred objects in American life, and everyone knows it, even people who pretend not to. So when you place blood sport inside that field, you're doing something spiritually loaded, whether you admit it or not. This is why the skeptical explanation doesn't actually comfort me. People will say, no, this is just branding, this is just TV, this is just politics, this is just a spectacle. But to me, that's exactly the point. Modern ritual always hides inside branding. Modern magic hides inside media. The spell doesn't get ruined because there's a sponsor logo on it. In fact, I'd say the sponsor logo might even be part of the spell. This is insane. This is corporate power, state power, military aesthetics, celebrity culture, and mass attention all braided together into a single, very confusing image. This is not normal, or maybe worse, this is normal now, and that's the problem. So is UFC Freedom 250 an occult blood sacrifice ritual? I think yes. Maybe not in the cheap movie version of the claim, but also kind of. We'll talk about that another time, secretly. I don't have footage of a hidden altar under the lawn, and I'm not saying every fighter is knowingly participating in some secret doctrine. I'm also not saying the audience understands what they're feeding. I'm just saying that from my idiot mystic perspective of symbolism, ritual studies, occult theory, and just my basic spiritual intuition, this thing has all the ingredients of a blood sacrifice. There's a consecrated political space. There's language of nation and freedom, controlled violence and the possibility of blood, elite spectatorship and mass attention, military and state symbolism. You basically have cameras turning the whole thing into a broadcast sigil. You have a world at war in the background, which makes the simulated violence feel even more obscene. And you have a culture that's so degraded, it can look at all of this and say, relax bro, it's just fights. That's the part I can't get past. Because what is sacrifice really? It's the offering of life force to a higher power. Sometimes that is literal death. Sometimes it's blood, pain, or fear. Sometimes it's the public humiliation of the body. Sometimes it's the crowd becoming one emotional organism and releasing energy towards the altar. And in this case, we see the altar isn't hidden. It's the screen, it's the state. The altar is the empire's image of itself. The fighters might think they're just fighting. The crowd may think they're just watching. And Dana White, Hunter Campbell, and everyone else involved with that company might think they're just making money and history. But let me tell you something scary. Rituals don't require everyone inside them to consciously understand the ritual. Most people inside rituals are participants and not authors. That's what makes this so creepy to me. A society can perform sacrifice without admitting it believes in sacrifice. It can feed violence to invisible forces while just calling it patriotism. It can stage combat while real wars rage off screen. And it can definitely turn blood into entertainment, and entertainment into a national myth. And since the accepted view here is that there are negative forces, non-human forces, parasitic intelligences, whatever you want to call them, this is exactly the kind of thing they would be attracted to. Not because it's spooky and I love horror movies, but just because this thing is spiritually rotten in a very old way. So that's where I land. I don't think this is just a strange sporting event. I don't think it's just a branding stunt or just politics, even though it's obviously a little bit politics. I think it's a ritualized blood spectacle being placed inside the symbolic heart of American power at a time when the world is already bleeding. And yes, I think it is fair to call that an occult blood sacrifice ritual. Maybe not because someone wrote it down that way. Maybe not because every person involved knows what they're doing. But because symbols don't need permission to operate. Blood doesn't stop being blood because it's regulated by a commission. Violence doesn't become spiritually harmless because it has sponsors. And a ritual does not stop being a ritual because it's being broadcast in 4K with commentary and ad breaks. If you're watching before fight night, pay attention to the images. Watch the walkouts. Watch the camera angles. Watch who is seated where. Watch the language around sacrifice, freedom, warriors, history, destiny, blood, and legacy. If you're watching after fight night, don't just ask who won. Ask what kind of emotional machine you were invited into. Because sometimes the ritual isn't hidden in the basement. Sometimes the ritual is on the lawn, under the lights, wrapped in a flag, and sold back to you as entertainment. This has been Idiot Mystic. Please don't worship the Empire's altar. Just study what it asks you to feed it.